Welcome to today's presentation, which is about the default mode network, and it's also about the salience network and um, the executive network. So, um, primarily, we're going to be talking about these are the three areas that really matter when it comes to trauma and healing. And so, as we're creating the safety in our system to come at things from a new perspective, from a new place of gentle, open-mindedness and open-heartedness. And we can only do that from within our bodies, and we can only be in our bodies if we feel safe enough. And so shame plays a huge role here because in trauma, the default mode network becomes dominated by self stories that are survival based. And this produces negative beliefs about ourselves because that helps us, um, it helps our nervous system maintain a sense of safety because it can predict, uh, it thinks it can predict. I'm a bad person. That's why this is happening to me. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Um, I'm unlovable. That is why my relationships don't work. That predictive aspect that has a reason that the locus of control is still with me. And that's so I can be safe. The networks that I'm talking about. So the default mode network is our autobiographical self, its sense of self, past and future. Um, and when we are really looping the default mode network when we're highly stressed or traumatized, tends to be looping on the negative beliefs we have about ourselves. And the salience network is what tells us if there is a threat. It's what's scanning the nervous system. I mean, it's what's scanning the environment consistently for uh, whether we are safe or under threat. And then there's the central executive network, which basically is the logic part of our brain, prefrontal cortex, executive functioning. Um, so the default mode network constructs the baseline sense of self. And so when we are reflecting or inward, let's say we're actively reflecting, our default mode network is on and it's our attention is inward. It's giving our sense of self. The salience network is letting us know, are we safe or are we threatened? So there is, let's say we're thinking about, because the default mode network can think of the future or the past, where mental stimulation, something about the future. A healthy default mode network will produce an internal narrative that is flexible, contextualized, and compassionate. And a traumatized default mode network is going to be very rigid, not contextualized. In other words, it's going to be very um, general and universal, I am a bad person type beliefs, and very much lacking compassion. And so, um, if we are able to be in a healthy development network place, then we are able to understand other people much more better. We are able to be compassionate towards them. We are able to maintain that gentle, open body, like to meet people where they are. And that is how we are really going to attune. That is how we find true resonance with relationships. So when the salience network is saying where there's a threat, which trauma biases the salience network heavily towards threat detection, which it already is very heavily biased, because as humans, we know that we are going to have the negativity bias. that the constant threat signal is going to create it so the default mode is um, network is chronically activated, and it scrambles to explain or predict the danger using the only tool that it has, and that is ourself, the story of ourself. And because the brain is oriented towards survival, the implicit question it desperately tries to answer is, what is wrong with me that has this happening to me over and over again? Or why does this keep happening to me? And so, again, it's going to try to be predictive. And so when the threat signal fires, the brain demands an explanation and of the danger. The default mode network blames ourselves, the beliefs of I am bad or I am broken. And then we have the shame and blame, which is another signal of threat, right? It increases that sense of threat internally, and that is going to signal threat to the salience network, which is again going to just continue this cycle. And that is how we get to the chronic activation looping. This is pretty self-explanatory. Traumatized storytelling, it's very different. So when we're regulated, like I said, it's contextualized. When we are very hypervigilant, it is more global. When we are at rest, when we're regulated, the default mode network can rest. Otherwise, when we are uh, trying to rest, it's always going to be just going. The meaning making is going to be curious, focusing on curiosity if we are regulated, and if we're not, it's going to be trying to make meaning out of it. Why am I in pain? And then the felt experience is either going to be compassion capable or ruminate and negative self-talk. And so again, that's why self-compassion becomes one of the primary ways that we are going to help regulate our nervous system from a bottom-up experience, is a felt sense of compassion. And so again, shame is the stability strategy. It's not a moral failure. We have a cause. It's trauma-driven default mode network. It produces shame because it happened because I'm a bad person. So we blame ourselves. And that's because it's safer than admitting that something else is dangerous. It's not my fault, then it's something outside of my control. So it's a stability strategy. Repeated threat responses create predictions. And so, again, this is just more predicting over time. This chronic activation becomes repeated sentiments. And so it's just they're so worn through pathways. They are automatic. They are basically they are the default interpretations that our body encoded. And so they are very much it needs to be bottom up change. They're bottom up um, embodied feelings. So when we have a default mode network and a salience network that are both chronically activated, we are not getting very much executive network action because it's suppressed. Because first thing we need to do is get rid of some of the threats, right? The alarm system needs to get turned off. But then we need to help figure out how to the default mode network can also calm down. And that means that we need to become flexible. We need to become more open-minded and gentle regarding our own narratives, and understand that shame has been predictive and evolutionarily um, relevant. And so noting that maybe helps us say, okay, I'm going to counteract the shame by actually focusing on strengths, on positives, on glimmers or other strategies. And then once once these two have been kind of neutral, then we have flexible access to the executive network. And only then. And so here's the things that we do in our therapy at Sensing Fields and Liminal Horizons. And they're very much targeting these networks. Grounding is going to reduce salience-driven threat signals. And that is also going to include the orientation, the grounding from the where self, orientation from the orienting response and orienting tension. And so pre-verbal or pre-narrative shock states are also happening here. We're gonna then, once we have gotten rid of some shock, which helps then reduce the intensity of emotion and affect, we can actually begin to interrupt identity fusion and this looping of the stories. And we do that through things like narrative therapy. I use somatic parts work a lot because I feel like the self, the curiosity, the calm, compassion, connected, driven self, when we can come from that place and we really it can feel as though it's a higher version of ourselves, it really is our full potential, then we have parts of us we can speak not from the parts of us that are activated, but from the self that is aware of the activation of the parts. And so we can unblend using IFS strategies. We befriend our parts. We know there are no bad parts. They're all adaptive and there for a reason, and we get to know that reason. And as we get to know parts, we are automatically unblending from them. Just like as we are beginning to observe our thoughts, we automatically get distance from them. Co-regulation uses somatic predictors of safety as well, but it's using it with co-regulating others or co-regulating other things such as music, pets, nature. Memory reconsolidation is going to be altering the narrative at the root of the belief systems. And so that's going to be working really with the amygdala, with the default mode network, but it's going to be getting to the roots of the beliefs that continue the narratives of we are not safe. So really, when we're reorganizing, safety is restored before we can make more meaning that is safe. So the default mode network naturally reorganizes itself. The brain doesn't need to be forced to abandon what beliefs have been identified as negative, because when we don't need them for survival, they are not as present and they're going to diminish, especially as we have new beliefs that can come in that are taught about that are more positive and more true. Because the negative beliefs that are I am worthless, I am bad, these are not true. These are the adaptive responses our system has come up with, again, for predictive ability. So again, when safety is restored before meaning is made, the default mode network naturally reorganizes itself. Okay. And so when safety is restored before meaning is made is DBR, deep brain reorienting, the where self, the co-regulation at the beginning, titration, pendulation, all the resources that we have. So these stories are not who we are. We know this. And really, even the truth of the stories that, we can question beliefs because we know we have a negativity bias and we know our system has been oriented towards really picking up the fear-driven, survival-based actions and beliefs and threats, and so our stories are kind of organized around that. These stories are not true. Just like thoughts don't need to be true, these stories are not true. They are what our nervous system learned to survive. And a regulated system naturally softens our internal narratives. And so when the nervous system successfully detects safety, the default mode network becomes quieter. And so we're starting with the very fundamentals of the safety with the salience network, because the default mode network, then we can work with that specifically using things like EMDR and beliefs, uh, memory reconsolidation, other beliefs, but we also have the harsh, rigid survival narratives can soften into flexible, curious reflections. So again, we're bringing flexibility, we're bringing gentle, we're bringing compassion, and then we are going to our identity will shift from a fixed state of I am not okay, I am broken, back to contextualized states, flexible states where growth is possible because our learning is possible, our executive functioning comes back online. And so shame really loses its grip, even, and we're not actually addressing shame in this, right? In what we've said here. So that is the presentation about the default mode network and the salience network and the central executive network and what they have to do with each other and why we're starting with the salience network. And so that is that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at support at anchoredascents.com. Anchoredascents.com or sensingfields.com. I'm sorry, Meredith at sensingfields.com or support at yourfeltsense.com. Thanks.